Hi, everyone. It's Larry Kotlikoff back with Economics Matters, the podcast. I'm here yet again with my great friend, Steve Laffey, who is, to me, a real hero, as I'll describe briefly his bio. Steve, welcome back. It's great to have you.
Here we go again, Larry, and as always, great to just see you at least on the camera, but hope to see you soon physically.
Yeah. So Steve's back for, I don't know, third, fourth, fifth time on the podcast. Steve has my title as America's mayor. He's not really Rudy Giuliani, thank God, in my view. But here's his story. He grew up in impoverished Cranston, Rhode Island, and he was in a very poor family with lots of issues and problems. And he somehow managed to get a scholarship to go to Bowdoin College from working very hard in school and excelling. And I think Steve's a true genius. He has an encyclopedic knowledge of history and all kinds of issues. Not an academic genius, but I'd say more of a just a general knowledge based genius. And he then went from Bowdoin College to getting a scholarship from, which is not an easy thing to do, at Harvard Business School. So he goes to Harvard Business School, and after that, he 4 years later graduates and takes a job running a bank, a failing bank or a so-so bank in Tennessee called Morgan Keegan, and turns that into an enormous success. Ends up selling the bank, doing quite well for himself. And then what does he decide to do? Well, most people would go off and live in a nice gated community and just retire early. Steve is probably about age 45 at this point, and just live the good life and not give a damn about anybody. But Steve
39.
decides to go back to Cranston, Rhode Island, purchase a small house, live like everybody else lives, live like he grew up, and then run for mayor. And the city was completely broke financially. And over 2 terms, he transformed the city's finances to the point where it was again a viable place for a viable city financially, and had a future, and is doing reasonably well. It would be doing better if Steve were still mayor, but I live nearby because I teach at Boston University and full professor there, but I live in Providence, Rhode Island. And I met Steve when he decided, after serving 2 terms as mayor of Cranston, he decided to produce a movie called Fixing America. And Steve showed up in my apartment with a film crew, and we started discussing the many reforms, radical reforms that the country could adopt that would dramatically transform our nation's future. And Steve produced this fantastic movie. It's called Fixing America. Steve Laffey, Laffey. If you go to Google that, you will come up with be able to watch the movie. The first person you're going to see is me, but apart from that, the movie's fantastic. And Steve then decided to run for president in the most recent election as a Republican. He did not make a lot of headway because the press was very interested in the, the kind of barbs and mud fight that President Trump excels in. And but in any case, Steve did run for president in the last election, but he's here today to talk. We want to talk today about Trump's first 9 months in office and what has happened to the country, how he views Trump's performance in a variety of different areas, given during this period of time. So, Steve, welcome to the show, and say anything that I missed about your bio, and then let's talk about, starting out with, talk about fiscal policy and the one big beautiful budget act bill.
The only thing I would not correct, but the Morgan Keegan actually was about $100 million revenue firm and was adequately run. Alan Morgan, a wonderful, one of my real heroes in life. But when I left, it was doing $500 million in revenue. We did sell it, and I was 39, and yeah, many people would have checked out. But Cranston, Rhode Island, it was just a calling, and it was the worst run city, and it was bankrupt. And we did fix it. It was really my labor of love for my hometown of 83,000 people, not New York City like Rudy Giuliani in New York City. Although I did take some of his stuff, which, it gets at the point of poor Rudy Giuliani, who I actually like and have met several times and held a fundraiser for. But once you touch Donald Trump, once you actually just go touch him, something really bad happens to you. And I think that my smartest move in life has always been to stay away. But the movie that you're in, Fixing America, yes, go to Amazon. People still do watch it, as they still do read my political book through Penguin Books. Primary Mistake. People still read this book, believe it or not, when they get ready to go into politics now. It's an old book from 2007. But yes, I'm the only elected Republican in the history of the Republican Party to be attacked by the National Republican Party running for higher office. That is, I guess, my claim to fame. And they just didn't want me down there. But right now they have a bunch of sycophants in Congress who just okay Donald Trump's life. But anyway, go ahead. Go ahead. Let's go. Yeah, because
Let's talk about, kind of on a serial basis. Give us your download of from your brain about and morality, about about a series of issues that have been addressed by the president. Let's start with the country's fiscal position, fiscal policy, and this new budget bill. What's your take on that?
number one, I was against when Trump was first president, the first tax cut bill, and the one that I guess even liberals go ahead and just okay what he calls it, a big beautiful bill. I find it a disaster, and the reason it's a disaster gets back to my movie, gets back to how I actually met you through looking through which economist in the world had ever done anything on the fair tax, which we never discussed by the time I got to your home in 2011. That's how I found you, and we became fast friends. This is a disaster. I mean, if you go back to what Trump's minions, sycophants who now work for him, whether it's Scott Bessent, who knows better. This is the problem of corruption, right? People who know better say things like, this is a great bill and this is going to blah, blah, blah. It's really just adding more to the deficit, right? You don't have to be a supply side or a monetarist, a Keynesian to realize that we're not getting a debt to GDP down to 3%, as Scott Bessent says he is. We're not, he says he's a 3-3-3 program. One of them is that. We're actually
And
having
the deficit to GDP, not the debt.
GDP. I'm sorry. It's actually still going up, right? The deficit under Donald Trump will be bigger than it was under Biden a year ago. His 4 years as president, we had $7.8 trillion in deficits. Now we're into the realm of maybe having 8, 9, 10 in 4 years. So all this stuff is really bad. And who is it really bad for? It's bad for the middle class. It's bad for young people. It's not so bad for me, right? I mean, personally, as you know from talking to me, I make a lot of money in commodities and stuff that I know what to do. The average person who makes 80 grand, who's literally over there making 90 grand in Fort Collins, Colorado, he's not doing that. He's hosed because the dollar's down 8, 9% this year and the stock market's up 10, 12, right? And so he's like up 3. But now we're seeing a situation where productivity and wage gains for the middle class people are lagging inflation. So this is why it's really bad. And we have people call this a K-shaped economy, whatever. It's really good for rich people. It's really bad for poor people. And this is what we have under Donald Trump. And so it's a terrible situation as we look forward to next year. Because right now we still have this situation where the first quarter GDP was, negative point whatever, the second quarter is up 3, and maybe this quarter is going to be up 2 or 3, maybe even the fourth quarter. But the long-term prospects for America, when we go from borrowing $250 billion in interest costs to 1.4 trillion, is an abomination. But yet there's nobody seemingly willing to stop it, not the Democrats, not the Republicans. And so the thing to remember for everybody listening is that when things go bad, they go bad really fast. Like, we don't know the date it goes really bad, where real rates rise. But it happens. So even
Yeah. They're
Even
dramatically higher than they were in the past right now.
even when the Fed cut rates a year ago and the 10-year yield was 3.67, it slowly but surely made its way to almost 5, came back down to 4.1, starting to creep up again, but they're higher than they were a year ago. That hurts middle class people and young people trying to their first mortgage. So, what has to happen if we stayed on this road under Donald Trump is that somehow, with his authoritarian way, he will start to repress rates. They'll find a way to do this because even now, as they complained about Janet Yellen, who used to run the Fed, issuing more short than long to keep the long bond a little bit lower, right? Scott Besant's doing this. People don't even realize this, Larry. They don't. If you ask the average person walking down the street, they know there's 30-year bonds and there's one month bills. And if you say to them, what's the average duration of our treasury debt? People say 15 years. How do I know? I have a tape of asking everybody across the country in 2011, never made it to the movie, but I asked everybody that question. The answer 15 years is it's like 6, but it's getting worse. We're only like 2 or 3% of what we're issuing today is 10 years or longer. And most of it's 2 years or less. So this is what we call in business terms the rollover risk. People and companies don't go broke because they have too much debt. They go broke usually because they have too much debt due tomorrow.
So a cash flow constraint that the country would face, just short of money. And so certainly Social Security is facing that, running out of.
Yeah. And here we are talking about this.
Yeah.
I ran for president on a Social Security proposal that was your proposal, which, by the way, costs more. And trying to explain to people in New Hampshire that, when someone fixes your carburetor or your car, you pay them some money. When we go to fix these problems, unlike what Donald Trump says, don't touch it, we're never going to touch it. Or what other people come up with was these bizarre solutions that we see all the time, whether you watch Marketplace or the Journal or whatever, these bizarre positions. The real way to fix it, again, it's at stevelaffey.com. You've written about it. We don't have to go into it. But we've got to change the very nature of how we do business. And does it cost more? It does. But much like what I did in Cranston, Rhode Island with a pension system, right, and fixed it, did I have to raise taxes to do so? Yes. Am I really conservative? Yes. Conservative means I balance the budget and get the funding of our pension program, which was 3% funded. Right? 3%, not 30, not 6, 3%. Now it's fully funded, and eventually these people in the system in Cranston die. And the same thing's going to happen in Social Security if we fix it the right way. But there's no effort to do so. When I say no effort, even Mr. Massey in Kentucky, even Rand Paul, the people who are supposed to be concerned about this, there is zero effort to do so. And so what's happening is the fiscal cliff is ever closer, right? Where things will really blow up on people. Why do people think gold is $3,900 today? Like, why would gold be $3,900? Just as a matter of course. It would be $3,900 because the dollar's weaker, no one trusts Trump, and there's massive uncertainty, and the governments around the world, especially communist China, who, by the way, most of these governments sold their gold at like $500 to $1,000 an ounce and said it wasn't necessary anymore. They're now all buying it back. That's how dumb most federal governments are. But that's what's really going on. This fiscal cliff is coming, Larry, right in front of us.
What about tariffs? So tariffs, a source of, what do you think about the tariff policy?
Well,
Or do you
what I find almost unbelievable is the discussion that as if nobody, even economists that work for Trump, ever took an economics course, a macroeconomic course. Not one in high school, have no understanding what's going on about who would pay the tariff. For example, pick any product. First of all, who actually pays is the person importing it. That doesn't mean he pays all of it. But the fact that no one seems to understand that some of it, if it comes in from China, if it comes in from Germany, if it's a Porsche car, some of it, the person will have to lower the price on certain products. It all depends on the elasticity of demand, the elasticity of supply, where can you get other cars that look like a Porsche, etc. Right? So it's all different. But what isn't different is what happens over the long period of time. What happens tomorrow morning? When you look at those supply-demand curves, they're static when you take your first course in economics. But over time, elasticities of demand, they change, right? So just take the ultimate one, the oil shock of the 70s. Everybody had a gas guzzling car. My father had a Ford, whatever, like a wagon, because we had 5 kids. He couldn't, he had to go to work. Whatever it took, he had to go to work. That's why we had a recession, because we didn't monetize every problem, right? Today we live in a world where there can't be a recession. So the tariffs, number one, on any curve, make us less efficient. Now, everybody who knows me knows I've talked about communist China publicly since 2005, that we have to get away from trading with them. I never said no trading with them tomorrow morning, because they control pharmaceuticals, rare earth minerals, and so forth. What Donald Trump did, which was the biggest mistake, was go after our allies first. To take one example, Canada, our biggest ally, right? Where do we get aluminum from? 65% of aluminum comes from, by the way, it's made with running water up in Nova Scotia. Running water keeps turning turbines, aluminum comes out, and much of it comes to America. Then we have what Trump came up with in 2019, which is the second version of the North America Free Trade Agreement that he signed back and forth. So then you take the fact that we can't replace it. But now the tariffs are 50%, mostly because he doesn't like the people who run Canada, right? Because he has a personal problem. It's nothing to do with anything, but he doesn't like the people. If you go to the UK and you give him, and Prince Charles or King Charles shows up and they have the second dinner and he goes to a very important meeting, it's 10%. If you don't do that, it's 50%. But by and large, what's happening in Canada is what we call the elasticity of supply, where here's exactly what's happening. The people of Canada, the people who run the country, are like, oh, yes, Mr. President, we'll come down and visit again. Boop, boop. In the meantime, there's a meeting. No different than a meeting at Morgan Keegan when I worked there, or Cranston, Rhode Island, or what we might do. It's like, all right, so we're never doing this again. Where are we going to unload this aluminum 3 years from now? Where are we going to ship our oil out of Vancouver going? We're not doing this with America anymore. Forget it. Now, then they turn and say to Mr. President, oh, yes, what would you like, Mr. President, blah, blah, blah. But really what's happening is these long-term relationships that we've had with our allies are over. It's over, Larry. Like, they're not coming back. And so this is a big detriment, because we will now, because think about it. Ask the guy who runs Alcoa Aluminum, another misnomer, by the way. Everybody thinks Alcoa Aluminum makes only aluminum in America. 2 plants in America, 3 in Canada. People don't even know this. Well, the guy says, listen, it would take 8 years to build a new one in America. 8 years. In the meantime, building houses, cars, the F-250s built out of mostly aluminum. How do I know? I own one. So all these things are actually happening. They can't do anything but have prices go up. They can't do anything about it, or profits go down. So the tariffs with our allies was a terrible idea. What you wanted to do was get the allies all behind us, turn to communist China, and work on the long-term solution of not being beholden to someone who has your prescription drug, has your raw.
Let's talk about retirement for a minute. It's something Americans think about regularly. Ask yourself, how financially secure do you really feel? Do you have enough money to retire? How much is really enough? And if you don't have enough money, how can you possibly find that extra money before you do retire? These are all tough questions. My retirement software, Maxify Planner, is the powerful online planning tool that takes the guesswork out of retirement. It weighs your assets against your fixed expenses to calculate how much you can safely spend every year for the rest of your life based on when you decide to retire. And it shows you safe ways to find more money. Maxify makes a complicated problem like retirement planning simple. It's accurate, easy to use, and produces what you really seek, peace of mind. So make the smart choice and visit Maxify.com today. Don't miss this opportunity. That's Maxify with an I, M-A-X-I-F-I, Maxify.com. Now let's get back to the podcast. Let me just say on the way things may work out in terms of the burden of tariffs falling on Americans, it may not be that we see it through price increases of tariff products, but we see it through lower wages, or nominal wages that don't rise as rapidly as prices. So prices could continue to rise at a relatively slow rate, but if wages aren't keeping up, that's what you really expect, is a decline in real purchasing power, because we are now going to be buying, as you said, aluminum at a higher cost than we can produce here. So it's inevitable that the bundle that we're buying relative to our wages gets more expensive. And so that's a real decline in living standards. So it's going to show up that way, but it may not show up in a way that people are looking for because with the exchange rate changing and
Right.
there's more than one variable here that can produce the same outcome.
It will happen in all different ways. What we do know from the law of comparative advantage is that we will have a less wealthy, all things being equal, society of
Right.
people being able to buy the same goods from people that would have been, because we had a really good deal. And so people need to understand this. The really good deal is that wherever coffee came from, which it's not really a national emergency, I guess it is for some people, they can't get coffee right at Starbucks, but it's not really a national emergency. But we had Brazil, where it comes from, in a situation where they're not looking to build the next Dell computer plant. They're not looking to take over the world with AI. They're just making coffee for us. So I'm not saying it's good for them. What I'm saying is it was always good to have these trade relationships for us, where people said begrudgingly, if we had to do something, whether it's with an enemy or whatever it would be, the EU would grudgingly say, all right. Canada would say, okay. What they can't take around the world is the complete lies that come out. For example, the one about dairy in Canada. People have seen this. The press secretary, the president holding up that Canada has been screwing us, literally saying the word screwing us for 20 years or 50 years or whatever it might be, because they have 200% tariffs on milk going to Canada. What people have to understand, with every country we deal with, they've got a problem like we got a problem with the wheat farmers, right? Problem by problem, I mean, or the corn farmers, like with ethanol, they're
Right.
politically strong in certain states that are important to elections. And in Quebec, they got a problem with milk. Now, milk doesn't have a lot of added value. You don't ship milk 500 miles, 3,000 miles. It's $3, 3.50 a gallon, and it has to be kept cold. It's not like oil. But when he holds it up and says that that's what they're charging him, it's a complete lie. President Trump put the caps in that we've never met, knowing we would never meet the caps to send some milk, some dairy, some cheese to Canada. So this is the part that really gets the ire of our allies. And that's why they're making decisions that 6 years from now, 4 years from now, 8 years from now are very detrimental
Do
to America.
do you see kind of a realignment of Europe and South America to China over time? Uh,
Yes. Unfortunately, yes. I mean, not even over time, like today. Like it's happening where there's a realignment going on, and it's really due totally to one person named Donald Trump. Does anybody watching the show, when you meet a Canadian, what do you want to say? When I was meeting a Canadian, I was down, traveling, and I'm like, I'm just really sorry. Canadian, what do the Canadians say to me? Because I know a lot of Canadians also. They look at me and say, I know we understand, just one person. It doesn't mean though that they're going to go back to the old way.
because that one person could have a child who takes command
We
thereafter. Yeah.
set this up after World War II. We guaranteed transatlantic Pacific transfer of all these goods by our Navy. When we had 700 ships, now we're 250, right? But we did all these things. And people said, okay. And now Trump goes back and forth on the NATO thing, and he goes back and forth on all these things, whether he would defend this or defend that. The rising uncertainty of all his changes is also bad for economic growth. It's bad for them. It's bad for everybody. What
So
people want is certainty.
let's talk about NATO, about
Sure.
Ukraine, about our in some ways disarming because we're spending less than 3% of GDP. We're spending the smallest fraction of GDP on defense that we have in the post-war, as far as I know. Yet we're telling other allies, supposed allies, that they should be spending 3% at least. Are we, how do you see our treatment of NATO? Are we just in effect out of NATO when the Russians flew drones into Poland recently? There were planes that scrambled from NATO to shoot down these drones. I'm not sure how successful they were, but none of those planes were American planes. And uh, and then Trump said that maybe Russia made a mistake where they directed the 20 or so drones. This is, of course, signaling to folks in NATO that or in Europe that America is effectively not, out of NATO, even though maybe formally in, but de facto out. Do you see that as the reality right now?
Well, yeah, first, let's back up to 2016, where Trump basically was talking when he first became his first term, and he was like basically saying he didn't know if he wanted to be in NATO, and he wanted everybody to spend 5%. And many, many NATO countries were well below 2, and some were at 1. So his threats and cajoling of all this NATO to raise their defense spending was actually in many ways a good thing. He never get out of NATO, et cetera, et cetera. Of course, he's threatened Denmark, a NATO country, with taking over Greenland. I mean, this is bizarre stuff, right? And that hurts. But let's go to the second term. We now see what's happened when the invasion of Ukraine finally came. Even Germany is really raising the defense spending. And you're right, Poland's going to 5% pretty soon. What Putin did not count on, of course, is that both Sweden and Finland joined NATO, which is incredibly good for NATO, because those two countries, they're going to 5% also, but they're also well set up to fight in the Baltic, in that area where Russia has to get ships out because they can't get them out through the Black Sea, right? In fact, Russia has proven himself to basically be a North Korea with a little bit more upside, I suppose, as far as their fighting ability. So this has been the big paper tiger, except they have nuclear weapons. So Trump's stance on this, again, look at his stance on Russia. We have to remember, President Trump has a disease called narcissism. So he thinks that he can change everybody's opinion, because he's stronger. He can change what they think. He can change foreign leaders. He did this in his first term with North Korea. It didn't work. None of this ever works with dictators, whether it's Xi, whether it's Putin. And so he said he could solve the war in 24 hours. Now, his minions, the sycophants, they all now say, well, he didn't really mean that. Don't get me wrong. He actually meant it. He totally meant it. Last week, he came around to think that maybe Putin was playing him. Now, we've been saying this, people with any kind of brain, been saying this for years, right? But the reason he hated Zelensky was Zelensky wouldn't do his bidding against Biden or Hunter Biden. He wouldn't do it. So that's why he hated Zelensky. That's why they embarrassed him in the White House. What people have done, of course, Zelensky has put on a suit and tie and met with him.
I think they embarrassed themselves. I don't think they embarrassed Zelensky.
No. By the way, I totally agree with that. They embarrassed themselves and embarrassed every citizen in America. Zelensky didn't do anything wrong. And Vice President Vance embarrassed our country more than anything I've ever seen. Like, why haven't you said thank you so much? But to get back specifically, NATO by itself, without America, is not something that Russia will deal with very effectively in the years to come. They're going to build up their spending. There will be a time within the next year or two where you read the headline where they'll turn to America and say, what are you doing? You're supposed to be building 3 nuclear submarines a year. You're building 1, right? Our ships are going down. So this is what's happening within NATO. It's going to take a couple more years, but in Germany, now remember, what they're finding out, which they didn't want to build up their military, what they're finding out, and I don't mean to say this, the free market doesn't win. The free market does win. But with all this extra building going on, do you think they're going to be buying Boeing stuff? Or McDonnell Douglas stuff? Or do what the French did, which is buy stuff made in Europe? All this really helps their economic growth, their ability to have inventions. If you went through the history of what was thrown off from military spending, right? And what happened in raw research, almost all of it in America benefiting America, right? And some people say it's the internet, not Al Gore. I'm joking. But anyway, all these things were throw-offs. You're going to find that happening in Europe, not in America, because we've given up this leadership. Now, cajoling them to get up to 3, 4, 5% was good. Having us left behind when they don't buy stuff from us can be bad.
Want more money, less risk, and a better life? Buy Money Magic, a new book by Lawrence Kotlikoff, Boston University economist, personal finance expert, and best-selling author. Whether it's education, career, marriage, housing, investing, retirement, Social Security, IRA, or 401k decisions, Money Magic delivers scores of secrets to raise your living standard. Financial journalist Jane Bryant Quinn says Money Magic is a must-read. Nobel laureate George Akerlof says Money Magic is quite probably the best financial advice book ever written. Financial guru John Malden says, you'll love this amazing book. It's full of wit, wisdom, and startling paths to a better financial life. And columnist Scott Burns calls Money Magic a funny, brilliant read, offering wildly powerful, unconventional choices that can literally change your life. Get Lawrence Kotlikoff's Money Magic today at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and independent booksellers.
What do you think, Steve? What do you think's going to happen in Ukraine? I mean, and in terms of what's your sense of whether we're pulling back military support from Ukraine or providing it? It's nothing with the Trump administration is clear.
Yeah.
Changes every minute, but it seems like he's been coddling Russia.
Totally.
As far as I know, he's allowed Europeans now to buy Patriot missile systems and send them to Ukraine, but the level of support seems to be lower. Well, on the other hand, he's talking about Tomahawk missiles and targeting. So at least it seems like from one minute to the next, he's switching his mind, but nothing clearly is I'm not sure anything clearly is happening in terms of actually getting additional munitions on net into Ukraine's hands.
I would say this, it almost doesn't matter. Ukraine, these people seem to be geniuses. They are building in Denmark missiles that will be used next year that will take out oil industries in Russia. In fact, don't get me wrong, I think they're going to hit Moscow next year. This thing won't go on. The war will go on forever, and maybe other countries will be dragged in. I don't know. Putin did a little test with the drones of asymmetric warfare. He sends up $1,000 drones, F-35s flown by Poland, get up in the air. It costs them $1 million to put them up in the air. No one can keep doing this. Each missile costs way more than a drone. So he's testing the reaction. NATO and the countries in NATO have to get much better at this. Trump's comment was shoot down the planes that come into the airspace is correct. But my major point
is like you shoot them down. We're not going to.
True. There's going to be NATO forces that will shoot them down. But what's happening is Russia lost the war. It's over. And Russian leaders get replaced, whether it's after World War I with the whole families wiped out, unfortunately, and the kids are killed, or the Cuban Missile Crisis, where Khrushchev was given a year and a half, and was sent off to, not to death, but he was gone. The same thing will happen at some point with Putin. And Putin knows this. So that's why he's not out in public. That's this stuff. When they start hitting and really hitting the oil, when you replace a drone that carries 20 pounds of explosives to knock out something in the industry with 1,000 pounds, sometime next year, lights out. The price of oil will go up. Russia already doesn't have enough oil to feed its own people. Now, remember this. Russia has really old people who are dying, and they don't almost have nobody left who can fix an oil rig in the middle of the permafrost. Nobody. When this freezes this winter, it's going to be very tough to get it back. So these are all structural problems of Russia. Young people fled. They've used up most of their conscripts. They've had 10,000 tanks, destroyed. The reason they have 10,000 tanks, if people don't know this, is they kept them from 1945 underground. They're pulling it. They got people on golf carts now going places. So Russia lost. This is a disaster for Russia. You're going to watch this. And by the way, the Chinese hate the Russians. The Russians hate the Chinese. This whole thing could really blow up with Russia and China. So what's happening, though, is going to be interesting. I don't think Trump will want to be on the winning side, of course. Russia's lost. The question is whether or not they take some of the advice that people would take all the money they have in abeyance in the Netherlands or in Belgium, $300 billion, and start using it. What are we waiting for? All these things have to happen, but you can see the tide turning. And it's a great reminder, whether it's Vietnam or whether it's Ukraine. The real problem is the isolationist movement in America within the Republican Party, my party, is so strong that I don't know how they react to Trump saying, do these things, or what. He will change on a dime. By the way, how would the conservative Christian movement in America react if Donald Trump became pro-choice? By the way, he could be pro-choice tomorrow. Has nothing, none of this has any to do with his beliefs. He's pro-life because he wanted to be the Republican nominee. If he'd run as a Democrat, he would have been pro-choice. He doesn't know a word out of the Bible. He can't quote a verse. So all this stuff is like, here's what I want. It's when this turns on Donald Trump, whether it's a loss of 60 seats in the House next year or some number like that, when it all turns, people will jump. It'll be a miniature Robespierre. No one will get their head cut off, but it'll be exhaustion. People must, to defend Donald Trump, you must be exhausted as a U.S. congressman in a district that you could lose. If you're in a Republican plus 15, maybe you never change your mind. But if you're in a Republican plus 6, by May of next year, you're like, what do I say to people? People are ticked,
Of
Larry.
course, we don't have too many too many districts that are up for that are close calls, right? Because of gerrymandering.
We still have lots that are D plus 6, R plus 6, and you watch. A recent poll came out saying that in some of these swing districts, Trump's going to lose badly. Now, anything can happen between now and next November, a year from November, when we have these elections. But the worst time to be defending seats is when you have a Republican president, a Republican House, and a Republican Senate. How do I know? I ran for the U.S. Senate in 2006. So, and Republicans, and I got a book deal with Penguin Books because Republicans got wiped out, as I said they would, after what they did to me. A whole nother story we can talk about another day. But this is really bad. And then the impeachment stuff will start for Donald Trump. And then people will pay attention to the debt at the very least by then.
What about issues like the rule of law, packing the courts, using the military in U.S. cities? He's now, trying to send the National Guard, I guess, not the regular military, the National Guard into Portland. A federal judge has ruled twice, yesterday and today, that this is not permitted. So far, he doesn't seem to be directly ignoring the courts. I take that as a good thing.
Yes. And I think when you listen, this is where Democrats have it so wrong. If you were running Chicago, if I was the mayor of Chicago tomorrow morning, I'd be like, I need all the help I can. There were 58 shootings last weekend. There were little kids gunned down in the last year just walking down the street. So at least what happened in Washington, D.C., where crime did go down, where he can make some movements. I'm not saying I want the federal troops in, but if I ran a city as a Democrat, I'd be like, Trump's making hay off the fact that people hate the crime. I can't go back to Memphis, Tennessee any longer without people continually wanting to meet with me. I lived in Memphis for 9 years. Way out east, way away from the crime that is everywhere. So crime is a huge problem in these cities.
No, I agree 100%. I think that the mayor should be saying, come on, and the governor should be saying, how can let's do
I
this.
need your help. Doesn't mean we have
help.
US troops
Absolutely,
there.
we need your help.
Yeah, I need your help. And this is where Pritzker makes a mistake in Illinois. If you're a Democrat and you want to win a race, don't fight on these issues. Crime's a problem. And there's people walking around who single mothers who are like, I can't take this any longer. So Trump is trying to take pressure away from things he's unpopular about with the tariffs and so forth, and the farmers who now hate him. They thought it would get better. He has to now send them checks, increasing the deficit, right? Farmers, because we sell 0 soybeans to communist China with no other place to sell them to. No one told them not to grow soybeans. So these things have long lead times, but he's shifting things toward crime, which is actually a popular thing for Republicans usually. But if you have any brains as a Democrat and you're listening, embrace that in some way that makes a legal sense, that you can get crime down so you can take credit.
I think, but are we talking about permanent? I mean,
no,
it's
we're
not
not talking about permanent troops. We have the National Guard for a reason versus U.S. troops. For Trump to say that or Vance, I guess, to say it's a great training ground, cities are a great training ground for the U.S. military, it's totally different things. It means you don't have any idea what's going on, or you're just saying things mostly that you know aren't true. And that's the difference between yesterday and today. We have a government that says things that they know are complete lies, and they just keep saying them. Even Nixon didn't do that.
So I'm just trying to think about this policy of moving, if you're going to use the National Guard, I would say what you should do is station the National Guard, have the barracks every other house in south side of Chicago, and change the entire, you know, and change the neighborhood in the sense for the better, in the sense of changing.
There's ways to do that. Listen, I'm only an expert in one city that didn't have a crime problem, had a financial problem. But to get back to Rudy Giuliani, for example, I learned a lot from him living in New York City prior to him being mayor and seeing it after he became mayor. And I adopted a lot of those things called the broken window theory. In other words, take care of these small things like a broken window on a side street, and
Right.
people might fix things up. I did things like fight blight. I go to a neighborhood with all the workers of the city, replace every stop sign, fix every crack, legally take down every branch not on private property. Boom. Then call everybody out. 300 people would come out when I was little old mayor of Cranston. And I say, it's your neighborhood now. Tell the kids not to do graffiti. I actually caught graffiti people. By the way, just so everybody knows, a very small amount of people do graffiti that destroy cities. Very small. In Cranston, it was three. I mean, two teenagers on stop signs. I went to the parents' home, told the kids I'd arrest them. They wouldn't go to college. They were putting up fake gang signs. And one, we whitewashed the back of a building, had a guy do it, had cops sit in the bushes. When the guys got out, we arrested them. We let them do a little bit, took photos, had them arrested, thrown in jail. Guess what? Everybody saw it's not go to Cranston.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, we have to do, yeah, you have to do things intelligently. The idea of just sending the guards in there to patrol the Washington Monument. I don't know what the crime. You have to have. You'd like to have a permanent solution. I think barracking housing the troops, the National Guard in the inner cities where there is crime, would be a good idea,
it would be a
because
good idea temporarily until these people got their police forces to where they need to be.
yeah,
Got people back on walking the streets again, two cops in every car. But there's obviously endemic problems with young people, and there's a whole nother issue of single families with no father figure. Get Denzel Washington on to talk about it. It's a terrible situation in our country. It's got nothing but worse. It's getting worse today. Our public schools should all be closed. You've heard me say this before. No, not tomorrow morning, obviously, but we cannot do this anymore. We cannot have these terrible test scores year after year. They're the worst ever again. Again, the worst ever test scores. Taking 44 million kids in public schools, 30 million getting a terrible education, and wondering why our society's crumbling.
and
I'm not,
meanwhile, keeping foreign, telling foreign students that, like, you can't come here, or we're going to give you visa problems, or
yeah, it's terrible.
we might even, we're going to potentially check your cell phone when you show up. I mean, this new compact for excellence in education, higher education, that was just issued last week, where universities are being invited to sign this declaration that they will do a whole series of things. It's really telling universities that unless you do that, you're not going to get any federal funding. It says that in the first paragraph. And then what's required here? It's required basically to hand over your entire operation de facto to the White House for them to decide who you should hire, who you should fire, what programs to have. It's calling for an ideological balance, suggesting that universities are here to have balanced political debates, and it says in the compact it has to include conservative views. This is if we're talking about what's going on in a university, maybe these guys have never been to a university or recently. You go to the chemistry department, the physics department, the math department, the computer science department, the economics department. It's not like we're discussing politics. These issues politics don't come up.
Yeah,
Ideology doesn't come up.
it's,
Having balanced ideology is like saying the university has to have a balance of people that can't change their mind, that have fixed ideas, and that we should allow debates. And this is not the purpose of universities. The purpose of university is not to be in politics. It's to pursue knowledge and truth, and to be able to change our minds, not try and get people to come to our fixed set of views.
Well, having educated, 6 children and watched them go off to university now, almost all in grad school and most with graduate degrees, I can comment on a
Home
lot of
educated.
stuff. I've been really strong on education. I taught the top finance course at the University of Rhode Island years ago when I was mayor. Nothing like you making a lifetime of your contributions at the university level, but I know what's going on. And while it's true that many of these universities allowed this anti-Semitic stuff to grow and should have been stopped at the very beginning, they didn't. And they opened the door for Donald Trump to run through, and they never should have allowed this. So they made major mistakes. And if universities like Columbia, Harvard, I'm a business school graduate. I have nothing to do with people on the other side of the street, on the side of the Charles River. But if indeed they violated federal laws that way, they should be charged and they should be fined. What's happening, though, is that we have, again, one person, the President of the United States, totally involved in this, right? The way he wants it, not the way Congress wants it, not the. So what he wants is to violate people's free speech and to go after people that went after him. That's it. That's what the Justice Department's doing, right? Go after people, Comey, whatever, who went after him. Now, at the university level, there were lots of problems. Student loans have been a giant problem. Whoever thought of the Parent Plus loan that was unlimited for parents? New York Times did a big article about this a year ago, with looking at NYU. Parents making 70 grand taking out $220,000 of loans for a kid who's not majoring in even economics, not majoring in physics, majoring in anthropology. So I've had many of these, and again, I've had my other pet peeve is this. Somehow, I live in Colorado. How many parents do I meet with that want me to talk to their kid who wants to go to Nebraska? Nebraska's 50 grand to get going if you're an out-of-state student, right? And I meet with the kid and I'm like, why do you want to? Oh, I love the Cornhuskers. And I tell the parents, like, are you out of your mind? Listen, my mantra has always been college is a new high school. I don't mean to make fun of whatever people are doing out there, but my kids go to CSU. I have 5 graduates of CSU, one at the age of 16, one at 19, one at 21, one at 20. And we get them to grad school as quickly as possible if they don't have cancer. That's what we do. And and they have graduate degrees, JD MBAs, so forth. One's in the Peace Corps at 19, but they go there and they live at home because we live in Fort Collins, and they don't have any student loans. It's like 9 grand. So
Yeah.
but parents didn't do this. Now I have no sympathy for the people who borrow $200,000 in the graduate world that I've met at University of Wyoming Law School, where they're going to make 60 grand to get out. I have no sympathy because that's their decision. But that has to be reined in somehow. But that doesn't mean on the campuses Trump should be controlling and how many conservative professors there are. I mean, what does that even mean? We don't even know what it means. It would change the whole nature. And when you get at foreign students, I have 2 kids getting graduate degrees in other countries. I've been through many hoops in France. Don't get me started about France.
Let's talk about retirement for a minute. It's something Americans think about regularly. Ask yourself, how financially secure do you really feel? Do you have enough money to retire? How much is really enough? And if you don't have enough money, how can you possibly find that extra money before you do retire? These are all tough questions. My retirement software, Maxify Planner, is the powerful online planning tool that takes the guesswork out of retirement. It weighs your assets against your fixed expenses to calculate how much you can safely spend every year for the rest of your life based on when you decide to retire. And it shows you safe ways to find more money. Maxify makes a complicated problem like retirement planning simple. It's accurate, easy to use, and produces what you really seek, peace of mind. So make the smart choice and visit Maxify.com today. Don't miss this opportunity. That's Maxify with an I, M-A-X-I-F-I, Maxify.com. Now let's get back to the podcast. So Steve, just for everybody to know, Steve home educated, homeschooled his children at a great effort and sacrifice to other things that he might have done after he was mayor at Cranston. He does have a daughter, Sarah, who's a brilliant, fantastic, lovely young woman who does have cancer and is our real hero to everybody who's met her. she's survived. She was given like 4 months 8 years ago,
I mean,
right?
6 months to live
6
twice,
months to live twice.
given one day to live once.
Yeah,
She
and
went
has
back to
survived.
college one class at a time, and then went to BU, where you teach, to the
Her
hospitality management,
master's.
graduate degree there, and was basically running Harvard Medical School's, hospitality management, and going to take treatment next door at the Children's Hospital because she has a children's cancer. Thank God. She has a children's cancer. If you ever have that cancer, get a children's cancer because you get better treatment. But had to come back and now is here in Fort Collins living with us because it got a lot worse again. But my major point is a lot of things need to be done to restructure how we fund college education. And I have a specific programs about that. I've talked about it on national TV about what needs to be done. But to get at the free speech arguments, college having safe spaces make no sense, right? Having people say that person offended me because he disagreed with me. I never would have got through Bowdoin College. I had a conservative newspaper. I had John Goldstein, a communist, as an economics professor, gave me an A. Right? I mean, in econometrics, I mean, I deserved it, right? So he wrote a Harley. He's still teaching. He's a great guy. Professor Shipman was a Keynesian. No one held it against my beliefs. I think many people thought I was doing was kind of funny. But I don't think I could have done it at Bowdoin College today. I think it would have been a real problem to do what I did on a campus. Starting, conservatives at Bowdoin, turning into a croquet club because they wouldn't give me a charter. I was president of the student council as the most
What
conservative.
you're saying is that some of this anti-woke program of Trump has actually had benefits to our society. But let me ask you the bigger question here, which is, do you recognize our country at this point? And do you think we're going to ever get back to, are we ever going to make America America again? Are we ever going to have an MAAA?
No. I think that you have now two generations of people that I meet who know very little about America, who are not growing up like I did, even with a very troubled family, as you allude to, where heck, I remember things starting to change as I was mayor. We couldn't find enough veterans to hold a veterans parade. Less people came over the 4 years I was, we always had a parade for Veterans Day and Memorial Day also. And you find less people involved in these kind of things that kind of hold together the whole system of America, right? And families and fathers and neighborhoods who would just say, we're not, you're not doing that, Steve Laffey. This whole thing is sort of fragmented, but it's been made way worse. And this gets at the point of when people will stop. The only way we can fix this is that people wake up and say to themselves, you know what? They say this is what makes things better, a faster computer. They say this is what makes things better, AI for everybody, right? The things that people say will make things better and what we all talk about, and if you go to the journal today, what's all the news about? TikTok, this and none of this. The internet didn't make things better. What makes things better are families staying together, are young people in an education system, wherever that may be, that they can proceed at their own level. Where I look back and talked about homeschooling my own children. I took over homeschooling instead of running for governor of Colorado because my daughter's cancer, my wife was at the hospital. Everybody, I'm a father. It's nothing I don't need a medal for it, but I took over homeschooling 3 little kids and they did fine. And it was the greatest labor of love that turned out that I ever did, even though I didn't want to do it at all. But fathers make decisions, mothers make decisions, families make decisions. And now you see less of that, right? For example, when would you have ever thought, not that people here follow golf and I don't, but at the Ryder Cup, which is the UK people playing America back and forth every other year. They go to different countries and play. If you would have watched the videotape, the moderator is using the F bomb to describe one of the players on the other team. There are young drunk people swearing and yelling while people are trying to putt. The thought process this ever would have happened 25 years ago, anywhere in America or Great Britain or anywhere, is so far removed. That's 20 years ago, not 70 years ago.
So we've lost civility.
We've lost all civility of people treating other people well, strangers.
Let's talk about corruption.
Yeah.
Seems like, we don't know the extent of corruption of this administration, but we read in the newspapers that, Donald Trump Jr.'s, the oldest son's friend is off trying to make business deals
Yeah.
using trading on the Trump's his association with Trump's son. We have coins, with Donald Trump coins, Melania coins. We have, I don't know, people get Qatar giving Trump an airplane. Now maybe that's going to go back to the government after he's done using the new Air Force One. Uh, how do you assess
Yeah.
that behavior?
The corruption in government has gotten so much worse. Now, if you backstep that to Biden and Hunter Biden, at least they tried to hide this stuff. And at the end, President Biden, he said he never would. He pardoned his son, which I thought was a terrible thing to do. But then you take Trump, who just puts it in your face. I mean, the thought process that a president would visit with a country like Qatar, which is behind much of what's happening in Hamas. I mean, much of the stuff that Qatar is behind, fomenting lots of bad things around the world. But then they look you in the eye and they have a modern economy and you visit. Like, I've never visited, but you visit and it looks like, wow, this is nice. You can put on a bikini and this and that, right? Even though they're Islamic. The thought process that a president would go there and talk about building stuff like himself, right, one day, and then take home a plane which can't possibly be used as Air Force One. Can't but just so people know, the electronics that they had to take the whole plane apart to make sure the Chinese weren't listening to every conversation. It's the land of bizarro world. But everywhere he goes, something like this happens. To say that the Gaza Strip we could remove all the people, they would go places, wherever they would go. Just so people know, not one person wants one Palestinian, one another country, not one person in Jordan, not the ruler. Nobody wants one of those people. Not 10, not 100. Ask the people of Lebanon or people of Jordan what happened in their country. So Trump says these things like he's going to build hotels. Now, just so everybody knows, he's not joking. Again, we have a president who suffers from narcissism. His narcissism is a true disease. People with narcissistic tendencies, and he is off the charts, don't have any friends. If anybody watched the video of Trump saying who his friend was and watched the friend, a 70-year-old guy saying, he's not really a friend. I had to go to his house every time. If you said, Steve, who are your friends? Like, Larry, you've met some of these people. I went to nursery school with them. Most normal people have friends. He has none. So everything's transactional. And now the corruption, to get right back at it, is about his kids doing crypto stuff. So he's backing crypto. I have nothing against the four whatever, Bitcoin or Ethereum. And so I've made a lot of money in it personally. Not that I believe in it. I just, like I tell you, like I try to get in front of institutional investors. That's all. So that's what I do for a living. That's what I did very well. If you look me up in the Wall Street Journal in 1996, 1997. So
you're named top investor of the year, right?
Yes. I mean, I was considered the best stock picker. The best stock pickers are in Memphis, and I was the guy who picked the stock. So again, I'm not the best stock picker in America, but I know what I'm doing. I'm good at it, as what I've told you about personally. But the corruption is now in your face. It's not like anybody's hiding the corruption. The Justice Department corruption. The fact that Trump got reelected despite having no ability to hire people. You can play tapes of me, little old Steve Laffey, on his first election in November, saying now that he's elected, his job is to get rid of every single person in power, because they're beholden to somebody else, especially Comey. He kept Comey around. Not me, not you. He has no ability to hire people. We're living through a time where how many chiefs of staff, right? This morning we find out that the guy who runs the Social Security Department is now running the IRS. The thought process that one person could, maybe he should run 4 departments. Trump's had people run multiple things because nobody else will take the job. The corruption around all these people, I don't know when it'll come out. I don't know what'll happen. Does anybody think, and I don't have any facts on this, that at some point when Trump's talking, people don't pick up the phone and short stocks, buy certain stocks? You could ask AI what the next stock that Trump's going to take a position in. I happen to own one of them, LAC, that went way up. Lithium Corporation of America. I own it for different reasons. As I talked to you about, lithium was very cheap, down 90%, et cetera, et cetera. This is the only place to be built in America. Eventually it'll go up. It went up one day to like $8. So Trump is just doing this stuff. And don't think that years to come and 2 years from now, whenever someone else takes over, they won't find that this was way more corruption than we're thinking. But the problem is America, our president, this is why America's not making a comeback. Our president is a reflection of what people will put up with.
Okay, so we have to bring this to an end, but give us some hope on the way out.
The hope is that the hope is that when the crisis really happens, that makes 2008 look like a joke, right? And we got a situation where the Fed is now losing money because of what they're losing $160 billion a year, right? Because of how interest rates have changed on them. When the crisis happen, will we finally just take the tact to fix our problems? Because we won't be able to restore like we've done. There won't be the ability to put the patches on it. America, I think, will. We will fix the problems, but it'll be different than the past. It won't be the Great Depression. It'll be
my source of optimism is that when things are so bad, when every institution, whether it's the banking system, it's never been fixed.
no.
Fundamentally, Barney Frank, who was one of the authors of the reform that went off to work for Signature Bank on the board, and
They went broke. Yeah.
they went bankrupt in just the same way that other banks went bankrupt in 2008. Social Security needs to be fundamentally reformed. The fiscal system, we're completely insolvent, bankrupt, short-term, long-term, medium-term, you name it. We need to rationalize it so that we don't simplify the tax system so we don't have poor people in 70% marginal tax brackets. A third of the poor and 60% are higher marginal tax brackets. When you put all the programs together, they lose benefits if they earn too much money. They face higher taxes. The healthcare system, we're spending 18% of GDP, getting 21st best results versus Sweden spending 11%, getting fourth best results. The only good news here.
These are things you just mentioned $1 trillion, like $1 trillion in saving to get to $1 trillion.
So the good news is that things are operating so poorly that if they're fixed appropriately, we can get back.
True. What is necessary, though, is that somebody, like in the old book, The Emperor with No Clothes, will somebody stand up in power, whether it's the chairwoman of GM, who just goes back and forth. I love electric cars. I love whatever. They just go back and forth. The CEOs of these companies, they just try to placate Trump. The congressman, this is why I'm not in office. They couldn't have people to say, no, I'm never doing that. I'm raising my hand and saying this. We don't have anybody doing that. The reason I ran for president, Larry, knowing I wouldn't win, but thinking I'd have a moment like we would get a 3-week thing where people would pay attention so I could start talking about it on a much more national basis. We don't have anybody. I wanted to be on the record to be right. Like, I'm right. What's happening, right? So, and I am right. And here's the thing. People know I'm right. My policies. I saw it with 500 people on Labor Day of 2023 in New Hampshire. I saw it. Like, people know, but they don't want to do it. We need some leaders to stand up and say, well, going back to the rule of law, we're going to have a terrible recession while we do this. Prices will be higher for a while. Social Security will cost more. And 10 years from now, you're going to be like, that Laffey guy's dead, or whoever it is. God, he did a good job.
Yeah.
We need long-term thinking, not this short-term mentality. And we don't have it anywhere, not in any part of our government, not with any corporation I can find.
We have it with Steve Laffey. And thank you so much, Steve, for coming on. And
God bless.
God bless you. And we will have you back for sure.
Anytime. Thank you, Larry.
Thank you.